And for those just joining us, we are going to be just doing an open Q&A on this call. So any strategy questions, any best practices you want to talk through, any features you're curious on, feel free to post those in our Q&A and we'll dig in there. First question that we have here is, when duplicating a transaction, is there a reason the role assignment doesn't stay with the tasks? Is there a better way to duplicate a transaction? We had a deal die essentially, then come back to life and had to manually reassign the roles. Let's start with that first question there. I may need to lean on you a little bit, Matthew, with this one. When duplicating, are you coming to this drop down here and duplicating the transaction this way, Amber? Feel free to post a follow-up in Q&A if you'd like. I'd have to double check with the role assignment how that comes through when we duplicate. Let me just confirm this here. Do have roles assigned. Let me just check this. So we'll see if that is acting the same, and then we will go through and check. So when duplicating, oftentimes I may not necessarily need the same set of tasks. And so I'd likely look at strategies there for when am I duplicating my transaction. And in your particular use case, when a deal terminates or dies, so to say, and then potentially, that contract is renegotiated back on track, or maybe that listing gets another under contract on it right away. We do run into those instances where we need to duplicate something if a contract fully terminates, and maybe we need to pick up where we left off with that listing. So if that's the case when duplicating, oftentimes I may need a completely separate set of task templates to apply. And so this is where we do see users creating more property templates in their account to handle some of those different scenarios where, hey, I did have a listing that went under contract that ended up terminating. Now I need to go back and reactivate this listing. So I may have a property template for tasks specifically focused on just reactivating a listing, because I may not have to redo everything I did before when I was getting that listing live. So that potentially is something that I would look into as far as how to help out with those tasks in that role assignment. As far as, make sure I'm not missing a piece with that. As far as your specific example, if I didn't quite touch on that, what I would ask is if you can, and if you have already done this, I'll check in with support, but I would try and send in a Loom video of what you're seeing specifically there, Amber, into our support team, so that way we can take a look at your particular transaction if there's additional details on that piece. Add a task template and then the rules were assigned. So with that, when I am applying a task template, if I already have the roles built in and they're not getting divvied up, I think I would want to take a look at your team and how I've built those roles in the team that's currently assigned to that property. So with that, I have two ways of accessing my access tab on a property. The first one is going to be this top header here. I should be able to click on this hyperlink for the name. It's going to open up this window and I should see manage property access at the bottom. So also tell me the team user and team assigned currently. So with this, I'm going to pop into manage. The second place to access this is just under your more tab and then the access tab. And this should tell me the roles that are currently assigned to the team members that are on the team assigned to this transaction. So if you're not seeing those roles assigned correctly at that point, you can verify that they're associated to the team members that are associated to the transaction. Again, I would send in a Loom video of that, confirming the property address that you're looking at and then what you're expecting to see happen. So that way we can take a deeper look there. And it has another question on that too. So I'm going to dig in on this piece as well. Is there any way to automate role assigns when adding a one-off task? I know OTC's goal is to not need one-off tasks, but my girls use them for random situations and they don't see them in their task pipeline. Great question. So I would start to ask myself, when am I needing these one-off tasks? Even if it's a one-off scenario, maybe halfway through I have a bill of sale I need to make sure I account for. That comes in later on in my process. I just need to create a task reminder for myself. If this is a task I know I'm going to come back to and maybe need later on, I might as well build it into a template. So that way, if you need that one-off task, you can just quickly hit apply template, search for the scenario that you're looking for. We'll do power of attorney. I'm actually not in my demo account. This is Andrew. So not as familiar as his list, but that would be potentially an option, because that would allow you to preset those roles in those tasks that you have. Because when I add a task and I'm creating those details, I don't necessarily have the full breakdown for my task in this screen. I would need to set a date, do this, pin that. And then once I create my task, I would need to come down here and assign that role via this section. So that would be a two-step process for your team if they are creating one-off tasks, is create the base of the task itself, and then make sure that before you leave that screen is come in and fill out the rest of those details. When I create that one-off task, is it truly just a singular to-do? Do I need to send an email for myself? Do I need to have a subtask list where I'm saying, don't forget to do this piece of that process? As a best practice, I would recommend just taking some time, if you use those one-off tasks, to verify everything else that you may want to fill out on this record. Let me know if you have follow-ups on that piece of things. Those are the two scenarios that come to mind on my end, but Hannah, Matthew, do you have any additional insights on that piece for one-off tasks?
I think you nailed a lot of the details there. There was something that kind of caught my attention with adding the task template. If somebody added task templates that had roles and those were not being assigned, I would definitely love to see a support ticket we could dig into. They should be coming through, but I have seen some weird things with duplicate properties specifically. So I don't know if this is like related, but if you're trying to add a task template and there are roles already set and they're not coming in, that's something we probably definitely want to take a closer look at, just to see what might be going on there. I'm thinking for the kind of second piece there of creating these one-off tasks, that could be possibly an improvement, adding a little bit more information here, being able to maybe set tags, set roles while you're creating that one-off task. That would be a bit of a project that we would have to look into with development. So the Idealab would be a great place for something like that, just kind of further improvements to adding these one-off tasks. I do like your suggestion of, if this is just a task that you might find yourself adding as needed, one-offs, but it is sort of the same task. Creating that template would be a great kind of workaround solution in the meantime. So
we had another really good suggestion in here as well, for taking this box open task after submission. So if you're checking that, it will open this screen so you can come through and add those additional details. So that may be beneficial for being able to come in, quickly set that role assignment, have that secondary screen pop up for your team. Awesome. Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Amber, for that question too. And it looks like that's all the questions we have in queue for now. So we did have a couple more people join us. Thank you guys for taking the time today to hop on this call. Any questions you have on the system, our goal is to provide some support, walk through those details together, and really strategize on what you guys are using in your day-to-day. One thing that while we wait for some questions to come through, Matthew mentioned the Idealab, and so I'm going to point that out for any users that may not have gone to this section of the system already. In the top right corner of your screen, you have your profile icon, and you should see Idealab in this dropdown. Now, we are going through and doing our quarterly audit right now of our Idealab, just making sure we're posting updates to these posts that we have here. So If you have any posts in the Idealab, we may be sending out some updates on this, but the goal is to really get your guys' feedback. You know, you are using the system throughout the day, and so you have some really great ideas. If you can get those posted up, we like to take the time to review these, discuss them with our team and see, are there any workarounds to what you're trying to achieve that we could help you out with right now? Or is there some future product improvements that we could look into as well? So if you have any ideas posted, you should see those under my ideas tab, and then you can always submit a new idea down below.
And just to pig off the either real quick. Obviously, you're not seeing it just yet, but something from your idea, Jenna, that we will be adding in the future here soon will be a completed ideas as well. So it might not have been your idea, but you'll also be able to see kind of a log or a list of different ideas. Moving forward, we weren't able to do it retroactively, but as we complete new ideas, there's going to be a kind of a running list there too. You'll be able to review and check out. If you're running ideas or posting new ideas, it might be kind of a cool section you'll see coming up here soon.
It'll be fun to check there and see, like, especially as we start suggesting, ways to achieve those ideas. If you guys are looking to see what other users are doing and what we recommend, it'll be a fun place to check out. It's a great point, Matthew. Thank you. Awesome. Looks like we have another question in. So, is there a way to put in a date into an email, say 5 days from when the email is going out? 2 examples in our email to the client, letting them know that we are active in the MLS. We manually fill in the space in the brackets. Weekly seller reports will be sent out on Tuesdays, starting first Tuesday after being listed. Let me fully read through this one more time just to make sure I'm catching that correctly there, Craig. Yeah, feel free to post up any other examples you have on that. I think I'm picking up what you're trying to do. So one additional example, we send an email out to the buyer asking which home warranty they want to purchase. We let them know we need a response in 3 number of days. Is there a way to do a smart block or something along those lines that says today's date +3? So really great question. We don't necessarily have a, double check this, but don't recall having a merge field for today's date in open to close at this time. Matthew, definitely correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I have seen users create some date fields in their account that they utilize for, first Tuesday of the month after contract date. Let me actually see if I can find that section. It's not up this tab. If I can find it, but the example that I have there is really just, first, Tuesday after contract acceptance, or first Wednesday after contract acceptance, first Thursday after contract acceptance. So that way you can use that as a baseline for some of those additional, templates, merge fields, being able to prompt things off of the, day of the week like that. So that would be a field that you can create in your field editor. And what you would likely want to do if you're using intake forms, especially, is make sure that your team is filling out those fields when you first start your transaction, setting that baseline of, okay, contract acceptance was on a Tuesday, so the following Tuesday is the first Tuesday after acceptance, or whatever that may be. So I'm not sure if that would fully achieve exactly what you're needing. I would likely recommend for the today's date option, posting that up to our ideas lab. That is a great one, and I probably would use myself. Let me see if there's any other workarounds. And Hannah, Jill, implementation wise, definitely feel free to chime in on this as well.
I was just going to say, is there a situation where that today's date is always like the same thing? Like maybe it's 2 days after your listing, where you could enter in a field that you're putting something a date in a field and then the email is pulling off base that field, like is that date always the same, or is it just whatever day it falls on? Could you maybe have it be, you know, your intake date or your another field name?
Yeah. That's the tricky part. I don't know how that would, like, trying to think, could you do it in a date template? I might need to break that one down a little bit more, Craig. It's a really great question that I would want to take some time and really poke around and see if that would be possible with some build out in the system. So Hannah Jo, could you make note of that question so that way we could just dig into that with the team later on and see if there's anything that we can think of.
Yep.
Ultimate, yeah. Trying to make sure I'm listening. As far as the smart block goes, hypothetically, you could have like 3 days. No, you can, yeah, you can though. Actually, I'm gonna double check myself. Potentially, I am just missing a piece. I'm just gonna create a new one. What am I doing? Because I think you have with fields, let's just say this was the appraisal contingency date. No, it's always hard coded to a specific value. So yeah, it would always have to be a hard coded value at that point in time. So I would likely recommend doing that as a Idealab post for being able to utilize like a today's date field and conditions likely is what you'd be looking for on that. But I would see if there's a way to maybe create some fields around the first day after type scenario. Really great question there, Craig. Yeah, and if we have any follow-ups on that too, we'll reach out as well. Next question we have here is on basic plan for now. I haven't used any commission features yet. However, is there a way to create a TC invoice within OTC and then assign a role into templates, etc.? TC invoice. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about what you're trying to do with that TC invoice. Is this just what you are sending out to your agent to charge for your transaction file fee? Is this something like a CDA that you're trying to get a full breakdown of the commissions for the file? Awesome. Okay. So we don't necessarily have an invoice through the commission calculator. We could get pretty creative with the CDA, which we'll touch on in a moment. But one thing I would want to point out here is in your account, under your gear icon, we do have an integration with Stripe. So if you are going to potentially charge your agent portal users per file when they submit that intake form, or when we complete that file, you could use this integration through Stripe to charge for those invoices. So that may be something worth looking into, and we do have some great content on our Stripe integration in our support center. Let me actually pop that open. And then from there, if you have any questions on that piece of things, feel free to reach out to us in support as well, so that way we can dig into your use case a little bit more. But you could use the commission tool to generate a PDF, essentially, of what that file fee is. So going a little quickly here, let me backtrack a second. So on a property, if you're on our version 2 pricing plan, you should have access to this commissions tab. If you're on our version 1 pricing plan, you will not see this. You will need to upgrade to that version 2 pricing for that feature to become available. But all version 2 plans have the ability to create a commission report. If you're on the Grow plan, you won't have the option to use templates for commission reports, but you can always come here and create one report on that property record and use that to, again, generate a short PDF on here's what your transaction file fee is. So there are some things I would want to, dig into a little bit deeper, but let's just build one out really quickly. So with this commission report, when I click on the title, it's going to open up the screen. I can upload a logo. It's going to show me commission disbursement authorization, the date it's created. I can add in some widgets to this commission report. These are the widget types that I have available. If I select field, I will be able to pull in a field from my property record and the value that lives in that field. If I choose blank, I'm going to have a text field where I can type in any details that I need to. If I choose contact role, it's going to pull in just the contact role. If I choose contact, it's going to allow me to choose a contact from my contacts tab and their first and last name to pull in. The big core part of the feature, though, is going to be the actual commission calculation breakdown, which is going to be under this purchase amount section. This is how we always start your commission reports. Your top level steps are based off of your purchase amount. And this is one of those standard required fields in the system. So you should be filling that out every time, typically for those under contracts. With this, I can add in a top level step. And with that, it's a bit of an interesting scenario where you're really just using this tool to create a PDF for yourself. So we're going to get a little creative. I'm just going to create a shell of transaction invoice. And it's going to look a little funky, but I just need a flat amount field for 0. Unless you want to actually have a full commission breakdown where you're seeing that deduction from your purchase amount. But as a TC, I would just, it's going to be a little programmy, create that shell. And then I add in an additional step. Here's my file fee. And then I can put in my amount that I charge per file. Let's say that's $450. And that is something that I subtract. And then I can tell the system if I want to include this step in the calculation in my CDA or PDF download. So what I'm doing is, again, really creating a shell for myself. Now, I don't need this end total. It's not really relevant. I don't need this calculation from my top step because, again, I'm just using this as a shell. All I need really is my file fee. So with that, I can check one of these boxes, whatever I want to have show up there. But when I come to the bottom, when I hit download CDA, it's going to give me a PDF. And in that PDF, I'm going to have a very simple document with that file fee amount, that title transaction invoice. And really, you can take that a lot further if you need to, but that would be the only other alternative that I could see to creating a PDF type invoice with your transaction file fee amount. So let me know if you have follow-ups on that, or if anyone else has questions on the commission calculator while we're here, because this is a bit of a workaround with this tool. We've seen a lot of users get creative with it, where you just use it as a place to generate a PDF of something for your commission fields. Let me know if there's any follow-ups or any other suggestions on that from the team.
Yeah, so you actually did mention, you mentioned the Stripe integration, just another option that if you do happen to have Stripe, so this is required, having Stripe. If you go into, okay, so good, you did have Connect, I wasn't sure. If you go into that property again, and then go into your more options, there's a process payment button there. And if you click on that, it'll give you some, oh, okay, well, it's hard to process an invoice for them because it would be processed through Stripe. Obviously, the agent doesn't have a credit card to file, so it's not showing this, but there will be a form here that basically kind of puts together an invoice. So you could process that payment here, type in all the information you need to, process the payment, and that will also send out an invoice, just as a, kind of another option that would be available, but you do need to have Stripe enabled.
And this might be kind of a crazy workaround, so bear with me for a second, but you could, like, if you added in a field that says, transaction fee, and then maybe due date of that, create a one sheet that has just a couple of those fields in there, the property address, the agent, and not something you send out regularly, but maybe you got that to send out towards the end of the transaction, maybe you could do that.
Yeah. 100%. That's a great idea. Yeah, because you could have it set up where there's no schedule on it. You're purely just using that one sheet as transaction invoice details. Like you're saying, just select the fields that would be relevant at that point. So don't know what fields we have in here.
So probably property address too, just so it references that, and maybe your lead agent or whoever it's going to.
Yeah, doesn't look like we have that field I was looking for there, but we'll pretend we added it. And then, yeah, you could even do like client type, contract status if you really need to. But from there, yeah, we just wouldn't have a schedule set up on that. And then when you apply this to your property, let's actually just do it. Template. Once those details are there, and like Jill said, you can add in some contacts if you need this task to show up. And then at the bottom, you should be able to download a PDF version of that. Really great suggestion there. Awesome. Next question we have is different question. Is there a way to enter a time outside of what is allowed as a drop down? Our lease back ends at 11:59 p.m. if not specified any other way. Is there a way to enter time? So first thing I would want to look at, are you using a date field, I would assume, for this, Craig? Yeah, if you haven't already, I would create a seller leaseback ends date field into your account. And with that date field, I would also verify that you have, let me see if I have an option I can set. Let's pretend it's this one. We have the time set up. So you could use the merge field for the date and time for that field in your email template to say the lease back end date is at April 12th at 11:59 p.m. And I use it. So my current email template explains the seller lease back ends at, and I use a date, specify the time at 11:45 p.m. and I backspace through the email template and update it to 11:59. So if you can verify, Craig, if you're already entering in the time to this. Okay. That's interesting. We're gonna check that really quick. Yeah, that's actually a really great point there. I would recommend posting that up to our Idealab. I'm going to make note of that actually, just with the team if there's any other suggestions, but it does look like it is putting that at a 5-minute block when it comes to that start time, end time. So what you're doing right now is what we'd likely need to do at that point as far as updating that. The other alternative I would ask, is it always going to be 11:59 p.m. for that contract? If it always ends at 11:59 p.m., it never can change. Potentially you could hard code that. You could have a field, even create a field in your property record to say, like, maybe I work out of two different states. In one state, my contract will allow me to have my deadlines up to 11:59 p.m. and then in another contract it's to 12 p.m. I could have a field that says 11:59 p.m. and then I could have a different choice option for 12 p.m. and then just have a smart block that I use to pull that into any email that I need to verify the timing. It's a little bit of a different workaround, but I would always be able to use that smart block anytime I need to verify a deadline time frame for that particular property. And again, base that off of a choice field dropdown. So a little confusing on that one. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out. Let me know. We can dig into that a little bit deeper. Am I missing anything on that though, Hannah, Matthew, Jill? Any other alternatives?
If you put it on the intake form as a question, like a yes or no question, does it end at the standard time or is there a specified time? And then, like you said, with the smart blocks, that like if it ends at the standard time, insert this. If it is at a different time, I'm trying to think how you would do that exactly, but
I would have to take a really good look
Yeah.
at, like, is it every deadline on the contract then that would have a different time of day that it could be due, or can you change it just for some of the deadlines on your contract? It really depends on how specific we need to be, but I still would post that up to the Idealab, just because ultimately that would give the ultimate control of just being able to set that specifically per date or deadline on your record. Looks like we have a follow-up to that. Awesome. I would love to be able to only enter the time in once and not have to edit the email manually. Is always 11:59 if no other time is specified, which is most of our contracts, but some say end at 5 p.m., 3 p.m., etc. Yeah, I would want to take a deeper look, like which dates can end at 5 p.m., 3 p.m. On that contract, and then maybe creating specific yes/no fields to control some smart blocks for pulling in that 11:59 or 5 p.m. or 3 p.m. Really great question there. It does look like those are all the questions that we have in queue so far. So please post any other questions you guys have into the Q&A. Again, if there's any features you guys would like more information on, maybe you are trying to build something out, we can try and work through that together. Awesome. Quiet crowd. One thing while we're waiting for more questions to come into queue, we have been making some updates in the system with our change log. And so big shout out to our support development product team as they're going through and just improving the system. One thing that we're trying to get more in a process of is just making sure we're getting those updates to a public facing place for our users. And so come to that profile icon and into the change log. You're going to see some updates on the system and just some key details on what we're doing in the back end. And so if you guys ever have questions on this, definitely feel free to pop in, take some time, review those details. If you potentially have something that you're checking in on, we may direct you to that change log, so that way you can reference those details as well. So with that, looks like we do have a follow-up here from Craig. What's the best practice? We'll type this out. Yeah, so if I'm reading that correctly, best practice with the smart blocks, what I would, again, look at doing is which dates in your contract could have a different specified time outside of the 11:59. If it could be all of the dates in the contract, I may reevaluate my strategy here a little bit. But if it's just a couple of contract dates, like maybe the acceptance date, can be changed to, or not acceptance date, but deadline to accept. I may create a field to say, is it the standard specified time, 11:59 p.m.? Yes, no. If not, then we can have a smart block that uses that field in the conditions to say, if yes, it's using the standard time, pull in a smart block that has 11:59 p.m. included in it. If I say, no, it's not the standard time, use a smart block that has the specific date fields time block, and then we just need to make sure that we verify that before it gets sent out. So really it's looking at which fields you would need to implement and then seeing if smart blocks would help out. Next question with that. What's the best practice for making updates that impact multiple places, such as update the fields as we continue to learn more and use the system? Now I've created additional field groups after a Wednesday call with y'all a few weeks ago. Now I have an intake questions field group, which I'm so glad you suggested that. Awesome. But my intake form is now a mess and very out of order. Do you suggest continuing to create new fields and field groups and then go to intake form templates and one sheets to update orders, or continue to alter the order on each of the different areas as you go? Really great question there, Craig. So there are times exactly like you're running into right now where I may make a significant change to my system, like adding in an additional field group or potentially reorganizing and sorting my field sections. We know as we get into intake forms over time in one sheets, like you pointed out, that the layout of our intake forms in our one sheets are controlled based off of our field sections. So if we make significant changes in our field editor, that can affect the layout of some of those templates as well. So generally, and team, definitely feel free to chime in. But generally, I would say, like, if I'm going to make a significant change to my system, and especially if I'm using it live, I'm going to kind of have a best practice for myself. If I change field groups, field sections, I'm going to go in and double check my intake forms and see if those layouts were affected. So quick pop into my forms here, hit edit, hop into layout, and from there I can see those details, drag and drop however I need to. For me, I find it a lot easier just to preview that intake form and just pretend like I'm filling it out, and then I'll get a feel for did I end up affecting any of my field sections in that layout. So that is my general rule of thumb. I add in a field section, I add in or delete a field group. I am going to spot check my layouts just because there is a possibility of things getting moved around. If I'm just adding in fields to a new field or to a field section, I don't have to worry about it as much. And so that's where we do recommend, like, as you are in that first, 3 to 6 months of building out your account, you will continually be coming back to your fields. But if you can get an idea of what the course structure is, that, field group flow, some of your field section flow, sooner than later, all you need to do is just add in the fields to the field group you want it to live in. And ideally, it's not going to impact the layout of those templates as much or at all, because I'm not changing essentially the layout of my field editor. So that's what I would personally just have expectation wise for myself is, try and get a good idea of my field groups, my field sections, how I want those to be organized, knowing that I may come back to them and make those updates. But if I do, I am going to double check my intake forms, my one sheets. But everything's fixable. It's probably going to take 10 minutes to get an idea of what you need to adjust in your form. And then after that, any other forms are going to go pretty quickly with those changes. Now, one thing that I'll say layout wise with intake forms that I just found best practice for myself, because there's a lot of different strategies around this, but generally we like to have your address and your contract title be at the top of your intake form. So if you're ever spot checking your layout, that's one of the first things that I know I look for in an intake form is, do I have those up top? Because if I have those up top, one, it just flows a little bit better for myself, but then I just get a standard order for things. From there, we normally have our questions come through. So property details, transaction details, intake questions, like you mentioned, that's another great one. And then I keep all of my other field sections like earnest details, financing details, inspection details down below, because I know my form conditions are going to require me to keep them below. So once you get an idea of your preferred layout, Craig, what I would do is just create a quick cheat sheet for yourself. Here's how I like to have my intake forms flow. So if you ever do make a big change in the back end of your field editor, you always have a reference point to look back to, and that makes that process a little bit easier as well. Tangented a little bit on that. Any final thoughts on that before we move on?
Just to kind of piggyback, I think what you were saying there too is, in particular with mentioning the intake questions, if you are using intake form conditions where, you know, if this answer equals yes, I want to add certain fields, I probably want to try and have my intake questions up pretty high in this layout, because if it's going to be adding things, I don't want to have to scroll back up past where I've already gone. I might want my intake form questions near the top. So I'm answering yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Is there a septic? Yes. Okay, great. I need to bring in some of these septic questions and fields. So I would want to have that lower on the list. So I'm just working my way down, don't have to go back up. Otherwise, you try and get to the end point, you go to the review, and it's like, oh, wait, hold on, you missed some questions. And you go back and fill those in. So
Yeah.
just one of those ideas with the flow of keeping in mind the flow of how you want those answered.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of prime example of what I was doing here is like, wow, where'd that field come from? That is a form condition in action, is when I change that contract status to pending, what I like is now showing up, but it's above the question I just filled out. So exactly like Matthew's saying, you want those form conditions to be like you're working in a descending order as you work your way through this form. So great point there. Awesome. Let me read through this one more time, make sure I'm not missing any points on that. One other thing of why also kind of getting an idea of your field sections sooner than later can help is when I look at my field editor in the back end and I review escrow details, inspection details, repair requests, septic, seller disclosure, loan, I have these in separate field sections. And the reason for that, this will be a very common theme that you see throughout open to close, is I only want to pull in these fields for loan details if this is a transaction with a loan on it. If this is a cash deal, I may have a completely different field section that I would need to track, or maybe I only need this one field out of this loan details if it is a cash deal. So that is why we do encourage users to keep their templates, their field sections, focused to the specific part of the transaction that it relates to. So you can use your intake form triggers to add in the appraisal field section when we say, yes, there's going to be an appraisal. So that is where, again, get an idea of the field groups, field sections, because with those form triggers, if you add in a new field to this appraisal field section, you don't have to necessarily always worry about updating your intake form to make sure that field gets added to new properties in the future, because our intake forms oftentimes, pop this open, I don't know why I keep doing that. Oftentimes are going to have field section form triggers. So when this contract is equal to this, add in the listing dates field section and special conditions field section. So setting the entire group of fields instead of individual fields, which means if you add in a new field later on to listing dates, as long as it meets the same condition criteria, it gets pulled in the way that you would any other listing dates for that file. So. Looks like that was all the points that I'm seeing in that. But again, if there's any other questions you have there, Craig, definitely let us know. Awesome. Like that, would you mind scrolling through that field group again, showing the different types of groups? Right now, my main details field group has status, update section, details, transaction, dates. Yes, and so this is actually our company demo account. Not our pre-built account that some of you guys may have started out with. per se. So, every profile is going to have differences with their fields. Your field should be custom to you, state that you're working in, and your team's processes. So with this account, currently the field groups that we have included are details, commission, listing details, agent intake questions. Those are probably the 4 most common field groups that users start out with. But you can see we also have added in here personal details, working on a Idaho field group for residential fields. And then we also created a archive field group as well, just because with our demo account, we create a lot of fields that we may not need to keep long term. So we boot them over to that field group instead of deleting, just as a best practice. So under these field groups, again, this does vary quite a bit. Oftentimes your main detail section includes a lot of the core details that you reference throughout your day-to-day. For your under contract records, we see a lot of users defaulting to this details tab for their properties when they set up their defaults and settings. If this was a listing record, I may have my property default to the listing details field group instead, because when I open up that property, I may want to focus on the fields there first and then toggle between the others. Now, for any new users, I'm probably talking a lot of nonsense. What that actually looks like is when you open up your property record here, you have this green button in the top left corner. If you don't see this left-hand panel, do keep in mind you have the ability to collapse and expand this so that little arrow icon opens that up. But these are your field groups on the property that you can toggle between. And the idea is when I need to look at my commission fields, I just toggle to my commission field group. It's easier to wear one hat at a time, focus on the fields that I need to when I'm working on commissions. I need to double check something on my listing details. I'm going to pop over there. Hey, I don't have any listing details. I'm probably representing the buyer. I want to verify my agent intake questions, same concept. So that would be probably the first recommendation there, Craig, is, what groups do you think you and your team are going to be toggling between? And then from there, what field sections make the most sense? I have personally found, and I really stress this personal asterisk on this, but I like booting my address field section down to the bottom of my details field group. I don't make changes to those merge fields that often, and my contract title typically includes my address up top. So I actually like to have different field sections be my first one under this list. For a lot of users, that can be your dates, that can be your transaction details, and then typically I see my additional field sections below. Any additional strategies on that in implementation though, Hannah, Jill?
Yeah, definitely. I think one other thing I would show, if you want to go to the field editor, and then you want to go to the groups and then click on sort groups. So when we're talking about shifting over these different columns, up at the top, you're going to have your details. So similar to what Jana was showing on the property, you're shifting through these. So here we can see them at the top, and then we can also reorder them. So it says details and then commission. Maybe we want it to be, commission first, or details, listing, then commission. Here's how you're kind of reorganizing where those groups are listed. And then within them, you can move the different field sections as well. And I like showing this too, because, just like Jana said, we might want to put our address at the very bottom of our initial details page, because we don't really necessarily need to look at the address. But I think this gives a really good kind of overview of what those group sections look like and those field sections within them.
Awesome. Let us know if you have any follow-ups with that though, Craig. And team, if you have any additional thoughts on that, feel free to chime in as well. But it looks like those are all the questions from today so far. So we have about 10 minutes left. If you guys want to post any final questions that you guys would like to take a look at, again, any features that you would like to see more details on, even just best practices you're looking to get more info on. Otherwise, yes.
Oh, I'm not sure if we touched on that yet, but do we want to take a quick look at the change log?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Sorry. Hi.
Yeah, we didn't do a full deep dive with it just because we've been very busy with
Definitely.
the team on the product and dev sides. There's a good chunk of updates in that change log, but yeah, just a quick refresh there. If you guys want to take a look at those updates, feel free to pop into your profile icon, change log, and you should be able to read through the different areas of the system that we're going through. So
Awesome. The only other thing I would add is that this afternoon in an hour, so after this call, wait an hour, we are going to be going over tasks and triggers 101 for that webinar. If you guys wanted to sign up for that, you're going to just head to open and close. You'll click on the Learn tab, you'll go to webinars, and then you can sign up for any of those classes there. But yeah, this morning we did contacts, here you can see the list of the different webinars we have coming up for next week as well. We're going to be going over documents next week. And then if you want to scroll down, Jana, okay, and then settings and integrations the week next week as well in the afternoon. But yeah, that's all I wanted to add for at least for implementation wise.
otherwise, we'll give it a couple more minutes. If we don't see any other questions coming through, we'll wrap up a little bit early today. Awesome. So our training webinars recorded. So yes, they are recorded. One thing I would say, Wednesday workshops, we are posting those up in our help center. So if you guys want to take a look at those, feel free to backtrack here, come to your profile icon, support center. We do have a collection for all of our webinars if you want to take a peek at those. We should have our workshop Wednesdays top from bottom, descending order from our most recent down. And so if you want to watch those back, feel free to. Our content team does an awesome job of going through and uploading these, but also adding in the different chapters with the webinar. So that way, if you guys have specific questions you want to take a look at, you can easily toggle through those. Now, for our group setup sessions that we see on this webinar page, our OTC product tour and our 101 courses, those are in beta essentially. So we are recording them mostly for internal purposes for the time being. So that way we can get an idea of what's the most helpful flow and structure for these sessions. That way we can really help our users in that first 30 days to 3 months of getting their account set up. And so once we get to the point where we have that structure outlined, probably after our first round of these calls, we will start making those recordings public on our support center as well. Great question. Otherwise, with these updates, if you guys can, let us know if there's anything that we can help out with during the week too, by just reaching out to us in support. Now, just a request from our support team, from myself, working tickets with you guys really does help when you're sending in the details on the property that you're asking questions on, getting Loom videos of what you're experiencing and what you're trying to do. That really does help us get to those questions much quicker and really cover it in the detail that we want to for you guys. And so we appreciate all of your help as you're working through those questions with us. And we appreciate your time on this call today. So we hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday and hope to see you on this upcoming call. Thanks, guys.